barbaric peoples came in and they destroyed their own empire. In the case of China, nomadic peoples from Mongolia came in and they took over a lot of northern China, and they weakened China because they were somewhat semi-civilized or uncivilized people. Southern China, the Mongolians did not go that far south. Again, desert people have a difficult time fighting wars on fertile ground for whatever reason. So the Mongolians could do really well fighting in northern China. Did not handle the southern Chinese climate that well. But they were not united. So later historians called it the era of 6 dynasties. No, there was a dynasty that had this part, another dynasty had that part, and they were not united. Most of the names of these dynasties were forgotten about. During this time, Confucianism was largely replaced with a more spiritual Buddhism and Taoism. Now, as was the case in India, this situation was not to last. But initially, Confucianism fell not completely by the wayside, but took a downward spiral, while Buddhism and Taoism came to the forefront. But eventually, Confucianism was to triumph, at least for a while. Now, fast forward to 1949, and you'll find communism triumphed, but fast forward to 2014, it looks like Confucianism might make a comeback. Communism has created more problems than it's solved. The Chinese have resisted all foreign religions, including Christianity, including Buddhism, and that's ironic because communism is of foreign origin also. But nevertheless, they say we have the best, and anything that we invent is the best, so the only religions they like to think they would allow was Confucianism and Taoism, but Buddhism made a lot of inroads. Eventually, communism made inroads also. Don't worry about the founder of the dynasty, but I do want, now this time I want you to memorize these names: Sui, Tang, and Song. The Sui dynasty took over for a very short time. In fact, well, I'll tell you what, I'll do better still. I'll erase this. They were known to be legalistic and cruel and hard, and they created a lot more disorder than they created order. Don't worry about the name. Yang Jian founded the new dynasty. Don't worry about the name. Essentially, he was part of the trend to where they were rejecting Confucianism, at least temporarily, and embracing Buddhism and Taoism. He embraced both, again, more spiritual. They built the Grand Canal. That the Grand Canal joins the Yellow and the Yangtze rivers. Oddly enough, we have a Yellow River located right nearby here. Some of you might know that. Anyway, but the Yellow River in China is a deep, wide river. The Grand Canal helped unite northern and southern China, and folks, the Grand Canal is still in service, still exists. Been in existence for more than 1,000 years. Again, as I already mentioned, these two monarchs were tyrannical, especially this latter one. And with him, the dynasty came to an end and was replaced by the Tang. Tang dynasty, I believe, was the last 300 years. And China still looks back on it this time as being a time of greatness. During this time, they conquered Tibet. Their territory includes most of modern China. Now, this thing about Tibet, folk, for many years there was a car that would come to this campus and park in a factory lot, and it had a bumper sticker, "Free Tibet." Haven't seen that car in a long time. Maybe the owner got a new car and never put a new bumper sticker on. I don't know what happened, but whether the owner just simply retired or left for some reason. But Tibet is still an issue. Tibet is ruled by, or the rebels in Tibet ruled by the Dalai Lama. And President Obama has refused to talk to the Dalai Lama because he does not want to offend China. Any of you familiar with this situation? One of you is nodding your heads. But anyway, this is still going on. But China conquered Tibet for a time, made a lot of improvements. They put Korea to tribute. They were the masters of all of East Asia. Japan was never conquered. In fact, Japan was destined to not lose a war until they lost to the United States in the mid-1940s. Anyway, now, time went on. They had a capital that had a population over 2 million, and folk that must have taken some doing to feed them all. They were not a perfect dynasty, though. Local officials started ruling without concern for the central government. The central government became weaker and weaker. And finally, some nomads overthrew the Tang, and another period of chaos ensued. Now, folk, in the case of the Chinese, their civilization was to be overthrown by nomadic barbarians, I guess 6 or more times in history. I mean, I'm going to call these people barbarians. I'm going to call the Mongolians barbarians. I mean, with all due respect, I mean, they call the Manchurians, they were also barbarians. China had a knack for falling to the barbarians, and again, a lot of it was simply owing to the fact that they lacked the will to fight. Well, and again, the Song is a prime example of this. Now, I have referred to the Song as a socialistic dynasty, a dynasty that the Song they practiced, I mean, just think the word song, associate the Song with music. They did a lot in the field of art and music. They elevated their people. They also did a lot for the poor. They tried to make their people more equal, take from the rich and give to the poor. But a lot of times socialistic people are looking to, hey, let's better ourselves here and now. And they don't realize that there's such a thing going on as war. And war is messy, war is horrible, and war is evil. And they don't want to make it, and I don't blame them. I know the war is awful. They did not emphasize the military. Their military was remained weak. Nevertheless, their economy prospered. They lost Tibet. Tibet revolted, but they didn't care. Then, when the Mongolians threatened to the north, well, we'd just take our capital and move south, get away from the Mongolians, rather than fight them. Now, eventually, these Mongolians overthrew the Chinese and conquered them. I don't say it here, but I will say it later. The Mongolians were led by Genghis Khan. I mentioned him before, and I will be mentioning him again in more detail. When Genghis Khan took over, he established a new dynasty called the Yuan, and that was a big turning point in Chinese history. Gunpowder was used, and the Chinese that invented gunpowder taught the Mongolians how to use it, and the Mongolians turned it against the Chinese. Look, if this doesn't shake you up, it should. We Americans built weapons and gave them to people who are now turning those weapons against us. Most of you have some idea what I'm talking about. Again, folks, this is what socialists will do. If we give our enemy weapons, they'll love us. Yeah, if you give your enemy weapons, they'll turn them on you, shoot you down with them. All right. Anyway, time went on. Mongol dynasty set up a system of government. They copied a lot of what had been the Chinese civilization anyway, so they didn't make that many changes. And eventually Buddhism was to take a back seat. Confucianism was to triumph. in the long run. Again, it's similar to what has happened in a lot of places. Religions, old religions will sometimes be threatened and sometimes overrun. Now, in the case of Europe, old paganism, the worship of the old Olympian deities, was replaced by Christianity. You know, some people will say that paganism found its way into Christianity. Venus became Mary, and Jupiter became St. Peter, and these old pagan gods just took a ride into the modern world on the backs of the of Christian. They assumed Christian names. But be that as it may. Now, I want to say this, and I'll close. The civil service exam. The Song Dynasty reinserted them, but they had them slanted, folk, to where they would only persons who had Confucius, they were slanted towards Confucianism. It's known that there was cheating on the exams. Occasionally they threw in a question about Buddhism, but mostly it was Confucian. And you had to memorize a whole lot of Confucian writings in order to pass the exam. In other words, the exam was slanted. Now, folk, I didn't really get in trouble over this, but I'm going to say something that I said a few years ago. And one of our pupils went straight to the department head and told on me for saying it. But I'm going to say it anyway. I mean, our department head has told us we can say what we want to. We have what's called academic. Even though, believe it or not, I try to be careful. In 21st century America, our exams are slanted toward the left. Now, I'm not talking about the exams you might take in school. I'm talking about the government tests. The national teacher exam for one, the graduate record exam you need to get into graduate school. To me, they're slanted strongly toward the left. I know because I've taken both of these exams, and I got the feeling the most leftist answer, the most socialistic answer I can give. What's that?
You said the most left answer was the right one, generally.
They're generally slanted.
Right.
With answer. Do you find that? Are you agreeing or not?
I was asking. You said
okay.
most
yeah. Towards socialism, evolutionary thought.
Right.
You know, basically leftist ideology. I replied to the department head at that time, not the president, when I said, my students know that they can put any answer. They are welcome to disagree at any time. And this student had said that I had been quiet and allowed anyone to speak who wanted to. And I said, they can't. And I said, I had a Vietnamese communist sit in my class last semester. This was years ago. He made an A in my class, and he even laughed when I made a remark that Vietnam equipped the United States in the war. Said he can be a Vietnamese communist and still make it in my class, that my grade is not determined by ideology. But anyway, in the ancient civil service exams were definitely slanted. In your book, they were slanted towards Confucius. And I'm convinced that our civil service, our high upper test, the GRE, graduate record exam, and national teacher exam, is fairly well slanted also toward the left, in an attempt to favor students who have leftist leanings. Now again, this time I'll be quiet. Anybody want to comment? You're welcome. If you disagree, that's fine. If you don't know, you'll say, oh, if I'm right, you'll see this as you get higher up in education. The higher you get, the more socialistic professors become, the more communistic they become, and the more leftist. Do you have any? Okay. Anyway, you'll see this if you haven't already. That it seems like our colleges are controlled by leftist ideology and leftist theology, just like they did in the Chinese, medieval China, where they tried to control it by, they were controlled by Confucian ideals. All right, leaving that.